Today we are starting CNS, drugs affecting the CNS, and the first chapter that we are going to discuss is sedative hypnotics. First, I will give you the outline, brief outline of this class. In the first segment of this class, we will know about the basic definitions. What do we mean by sedative or sedation? What do we mean by hypnotic or hypnosis? And then we will see what are the sedative and hypnotic drugs, examples of sedative and hypnotic drugs. And broadly we will discuss about barbiturates in this class. We will see the types of barbiturates, their pharmacological actions, and by the end of this lecture we should know why we prefer benzodiazepines compared to barbiturates. Why barbiturates are not preferred compared to benzodiazepines. In the next class, we will discuss about benzodiazepines, in which we will discuss about their mechanism of action in detail. And once we have known or once we have discussed the mechanism of action of benzodiazepine in the next class, we will also discuss the mechanism of action of barbiturates so that we can easily compare and contrast the mechanism of action of benzodiazepines and barbiturates. So I am not discussing the mechanism of action of barbiturates or benzodiazepines in this class. The basic focus of this class would be to understand the differences between the barbiturates and benzodiazepines. Both are the types of sedative hypnotics, but nowadays barbiturates are only used for certain clinical conditions. Barbiturates are not the preferred sedative hypnotic drugs anymore because of various reasons. And why these are not the preferred sedative hypnotics, we will discuss. For certain indications, still we use barbiturates such as phenobarbital. For example, in tonic-clonic seizures, we use barbiturates such as phenobarbital. We use barbiturates such as thiopental sodium for the induction of anesthesia. So there are very limited conditions in which we use barbiturates. So let us first start the definition of sedative. What do you mean by sedative? Sedative drug basically reduces the nervousness, excitability and irritation by causing an inhibitory effect on the central nervous system. But the thing that you should remember is that although they reduce nervousness, irritation, excitability, but they do not induce sleep. So they will have a calming effect on the CNS. They will reduce anxiety, nervousness, excitation, but they will not cause any hypnosis. Then what do you mean by hypnotics? They will calm down the CNS to the extent that they can induce sleep. So hypnotic drug actually produces drowsiness and induces sleep. They can encourage the onset and maintenance of sleep. But the thing is, the ideal hypnotic drug should induce the kind of sleep that resembles the natural sleep as far as possible. And one more thing that you should understand that we will discuss, a sedative drug, if given in a higher doses, it can function as a hypnotic. So the CNS depressant effect of sedative hypnotic, we can say, is a dose dependent effect. So what are the differences between sedative and hypnotic drugs? Basic thing is that sedative drug, they reduces the excitation, they calm down the subjects without inducing the sleep. Whereas hypnotic drug basically induces the sleep. And a same drug which is functioning as sedative, if we increase the dose, can function as a hypnotic. So the CNS depressant effect is a dose dependent. So what I was telling, what should be the characteristic of an ideal hypnotic drug? The first thing that you should remember, the sleep that a hypnotic drug is inducing, it should resemble the natural sleep as far as possible, so that there shouldn't be any hangover. When the patient wakes up in the morning, he should feel refreshed without any hangover of the drug. And it should have a low toxicity. The safety profile should be good, and the drug interaction should be minimal or negligible. So these are the properties of ideal hypnotic drug. Now, basic pharmacology of sedative hypnotic. I was telling you, these CNS depressant drug, they basically shows the dose dependent action. And what do you mean by dose dependent action? Same drug can cause different effect based on the doses that we are using. On the low dose, we will get a sedative effect. So a sedative drug will reduce the anxiety, will promote the relaxation, will reduce the nervousness. As we increase the dose, we will start getting the hypnotic effect. So first sedation has happened, then hypnosis has happened, and on further increase of dose, what you will see, a same drug can induce anesthesia. So you can start noticing the anesthetic effect. And further increasing dose, particularly for drugs such as barbiturate, if you increase the dose any further, the patient might go into respiratory depression, there might be fall in blood pressure, and patient might even go into coma, and ultimately the patient might die. So the thing is, for drugs such as barbiturate, the safety margin is very narrow. So these drugs are producing dose dependent effect. In low dosage, we are noticing sedation, then hypnotic effect are appearing. On further increase of dose, we are noticing the anesthetic effect. On further increase of dose, there might be respiratory depression, fall in blood pressure, cardiovascular depression, patient might go into coma, and ultimately patient might die. Now, before going any further, let us discuss about the history of the sedative hypnotics. Alcohol is the oldest sedative drug, and it has been used irrationally for many centuries. Barbiturates was discovered approximately 100 or 120 years ago, but there were certain drawbacks of barbiturates that we will discuss. The basic thing was that the safety profile of barbiturate was not very good, or it had a narrow therapeutic index. It was interacting with various drugs. It was inducing the metabolism of other drugs. The sleep that it was producing was not very good. It was leading to hangover, and because it had a narrow therapeutic index, even a slighter increase in dose would lead to anesthetic effect, then even coma. So because of these reasons, barbiturates nowadays is indicated for only few clinical conditions. Now in 1960s, benzodiazepines were discovered. They were discovered accidentally, quite accidentally. They were discovered. In 1963, diazepam came on the market, and it is still being used. And why barbiturates are not preferred much, and why benzodiazepines are preferred more compared to barbiturates will be the focus of this particular lecture. Barbiturates are the derivative of barbituric acid, and basically their effect on CNS resembles that of alcohol. They produce alcohol-like symptoms. They can impair the motor control, they can induce dizziness, and they can slow down the breathing and heart rate. Now, based on the duration of action, we can classify barbiturates into three categories. First is long-acting barbiturate. Second is short-acting, and third is ultra-short-acting barbiturate. Long-acting barbiturate, why we call it as long-acting? Because their duration of action is more than 24 hours. And in this, we put one drug which is known as phenobarbital. Phenobarbital is used as an anticonvulsant. So it is used in the treatment of tonic-clonic seizures, and it has got specific anticonvulsant action which is independent of its CNS depressant effect, and tolerance does not happen to its anticonvulsant effect even on a long-term use. We will discuss about the role of phenobarbital as an anticonvulsant when we discuss anticonvulsant. Second category are the short-acting barbiturates. Short-acting barbiturates, their duration of action is in the range of 3 to 8 hours. In this, pentobarbital, secobarbital, emobarbital are there. But As I have told you earlier, these short acting barbiturates, which are basically indicated to be used as sedative hypnotic, are no longer being used in clinical practice because of various reasons, because of its safety margin being not very good or safety profile being not very good, because of its drug interactions, because of its these drug not producing ideal sleep. Then ultra soft acting barbiturates, thiopental sodium. Thiopental sodium is very commonly used anesthetic, and these are basically used for IV induction of anesthesia. Their action starts within seconds, and their duration of action is about 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, we can say. So in clinical practice, we are only using the ultra short acting barbiturates, thiopental sodium, for IV induction of anesthesia, and phenobarbital, which is a long acting barbiturate, and these are used for the long term management of tonic-clonic seizure, and it has got specific anticonvulsant action. Apart from that, sometimes barbiturate can be used in neonatal jaundice. For the treatment of kernicterus in the neonates, barbiturates are used. So what we have seen, we are not using short acting barbiturates nowadays, which are basically indicated as sedative hypnotic. We are only using long acting barbiturate, phenobarbital, for epilepsy or as an anticonvulsant, and we are using ultra short acting barbiturates, that is thiopental sodium, for IV induction of anesthesia. Apart from that, phenobarbital is sometimes used in the treatment of neonatal jaundice. Now we will discuss why the use of barbiturate has been restricted to only few indications. Why it is not being very commonly used as sedative hypnotic? What are the drawbacks of barbiturate which has led to its restriction in clinical uses? To understand this, we need to understand its pharmacokinetic property, its pharmacological actions. Mechanism of action I will not discuss today for barbiturate. Mechanism of action I will discuss with benzodiazepines, and we will compare and contrast the mechanism of action of barbiturates with benzodiazepines. How the mechanism of action of barbiturate differentiate or are different from the mechanism of action of benzodiazepines. Let us first understand the pharmacokinetic property. Among pharmacokinetic property, let us focus on two aspects: its absorption and its distribution. Its metabolism and its excretion we will discuss just after a few minutes. Barbiturates, they are absorbed orally and they are distributed throughout the body. They are lipid soluble. Because of their high lipid solubility, they can cross the blood-brain barrier. Even during pregnancy, they can cross the placental barrier. But one good thing, because of its lipid solubility or because of its high lipid solubility, is that its onset of action is very rapid, particularly for drugs such as thiopentone sodium. Now, thiopentone sodium, we have seen that it has got a ultra short acting onset of action. Its onset of action is within seconds, and its total duration of action is approximately 20 minutes or in the range of 20 to 30 minutes. So the reason why, because its action appear within fraction of second, and why its action only remain up to 20 minutes, the reason is, first reason is its lipid solubility. Okay, the second thing that you should understand, or you would have read this phenomenon in general pharmacology. One phenomenon is known as redistribution. Now, what is this redistribution? This thiopentone sodium follows this redistribution. In the redistribution in the body, what happens? First, because of its high lipid solubility, it is crossing the blood-brain barrier. It is going to the brain, and then due to this redistribution phenomenon, from the brain, the drug will be redistributed to the less vascular tissues. First, it will get distributed into the skeletal muscle, and then it will get distributed to the adipose tissue. So redistribution is one of the factors, apart from its metabolism and excretion. Redistribution, particularly in the context of thiopentone sodium, redistribution is one of the main factors for the termination of its CNS effects. So, have you understood this phenomenon? Yes or no? Because of its high lipid solubility, it is crossing the blood-brain barrier, attaining the sufficient plasma concentration in the brain, and then because of this redistribution phenomenon, the drug is getting redistributed to the less vascular tissues, that is from the brain, it is getting redistributed to the skeletal muscle, and then to the even lesser vascular tissues such as adipose tissue. So redistribution is the main factor for the termination of the action of thiopentone sodium. Okay. Now let us one by one discuss its pharmacological actions. In the CNS, we have seen these drugs show the dose dependent CNS depressant effect. And in the context of barbiturate, they show the phenomenon of generalized depression. What happens in the low doses? We will see the sedative effect. As we increase the dose, we will start noticing the euphoria, disinhibition, impaired judgment, emotional instability, loss of self-control, and even further increase of dose, we will start noticing the hypnotic effect, and on further increase of dose, we can induce the general anesthesia. And what will happen if we go on increasing the dose further? It will lead to respiratory depression, depression of vasomotor center. There will be depression of, or there will be fall of blood pressure. Patient might go into coma, and patient even might die. So in the context of these drugs, we can say that these drugs basically shows the graded dose response curve. Now this dose response curve, you are noticing the dose response curve of two drugs, drug A and drug B. Now, what you are noticing here, for drug A, we are seeing the linear slope. This linear slope is basically showing the dose response curve of barbiturates. And what you are noticing in the low dose, what phenomenon is being observed? Please see the graph and tell. In low dose, which phenomenon is being observed? Yes? Sedation. On further increase of dose, hypnosis. Even further increase of dose, anesthesia. And if you go on increasing the dose further, it will lead to respiratory depression of vasomotor center in the medulla, and patient might ultimately go into coma and patient might even die. For drug B, we will discuss it further. Drug B, the graph or the dose response curve basically typifies the phenomenon shown by the benzodiazepines. What is the basic difference between drug A and drug B as per this dose response curve? Please see this dose response curve and reply. For drug B, for patient to go from hypnosis to general anesthetic effect or even respiratory depression or vasomotor center depression, you need a very higher increase in dose. But for drug A, even slighter increase in dose will lead to general anesthetic effect or even fall in BP and other effects. Okay. So we can say that barbiturates are a narrow therapeutic index drug. Their safety margin is very narrow. You have to be very careful while prescribing barbiturates. Sorry, I was talking about barbiturates. So we can say that barbiturates are a very narrow therapeutic index drug. You have to be very careful while prescribing barbiturates, because even a slighter increase in dose might put the patient in danger. Now let us understand the effect of barbiturates on sleep. And once we have understood the effect of barbiturate on sleep, we will see the effect of benzodiazepines on sleep. And we will see, or we will try to understand how benzodiazepines are better compared to barbiturates as far as their effect on sleep is concerned. But before understanding their effect on sleep, just let us revise the normal sleep cycle. You have read about sleep cycle in physiology. What are the various cycles? Very good. Non-rapid eye movement and rapid eye movement sleep phase. So the normal sleep cycle, how it goes: patient is awake, and then the non-rapid eye sleep phase starts. NREM. In NREM, we have further stages: stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the patient goes into rapid eye movement sleep. So this internal sleep cycle actually reoccur 4 to 5 times per night. Now, what is the significance of this rapid eye movement sleep phase? In the rapid eye movement sleep phase, there is a rapid eye movement, and patient uh, have a vivid dreams, and he or she can recall the dreams. There is occasional twitches of individual muscle group against a background of atonia of skeletal muscles. So normally this rapid eye movement sleep phase, the EEG activity seen in REM phase is similar to that seen in the wake up phase. So here you can see when the person is awake, we will basically notice the beta wave, and when eye are closed but person is awake, we will notice the alpha wave. Then the patient will go into non-rapid eye movement phase. This non-rapid eye movement phase is further characterized by stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 and stage 4. Now see, stage 1 and stage 2 of NREM, in stage 1 NREM, eye movements are less, whereas in stage 2 NREM, eye movements are further reduced. And in the stage 1 NREM, the muscles begin to relax. So stage 1 NREM consists of 5 to 10% of total sleep time, whereas stage 2 NREM consists of 40 to 50% of total sleep time. Now stage 3 and stage 4 NREM is important for you to understand. Stage 3 and stage 4 NREM, we call them as delta wave sleep or slow wave sleep. And for a sound sleep, for a nice sleep or for a good sleep, this stage 3 and stage 4 NREM is important apart from REM. So stage 4 NREM is the deepest level of sleep. In the stage 4 NREM, there will not be any eye movement and the muscle will be fully relaxed. And there is one wave that starts appearing, that is delta wave. Delta wave first appears during stage 3 NREM, and then it is very prominent during the stage 4 NREM. So this stage 4 and stage 3 NREM is known as slow wave sleep. So what we are noticing, person is awake, then person is going into NREM. NREM sleep phase actually consists of 70 to 80% of total sleep time. And then from NREM the patient will go into REM, rapid eye movement sleep phase. In this there will be reappearance of alpha wave. Alpha wave, what I have told you in the beginning, alpha wave, if you are awake, but if you have closed your eye and if your EEG is taken, alpha wave will be noticed. So REM, during REM alpha wave reappears, and during REM patient has got a vivid dreams. There is increase in heart rate, increase in breathing, increase in brain activity, and the important thing is that whatever dreams that you notices or that you see during this particular phase of REM, you can recall that particular dream. And REM consists of 20 to 30% of total sleep time. Now for a normal sleep, this stage 3 and stage 4 NREM and REM, particularly this REM sleep phase, is very important. And any drug if it disturbs the normal sleep cycle pattern, particularly if it disturbs REM, and also if it disturbs stage 3 and stage 4, it will lead to hangover effect. And in the context of hangover, this REM is very important. If a particular drug is disturbing this REM phase, that drug cannot be a good hypnotic. Now let us understand the effect of barbiturates on sleep. Barbiturate, to an extent, it is good as a hypnotic because it is decreasing the latency of sleep onset, and it is increasing the total duration of sleep, and it is also decreasing the night awakening. But the bad thing is that it is disturbing the REM phase, and it is also disturbing the stage 3 and stage 4 NREM phase. Stage 3 and stage 4 NREM phase are also reduced. So this whole cycle of REM and NREM sleep cycle is disturbed, is distorted. And because of this, particularly because of this distortion of the REM phase, the patient will have a hangover in the morning. He will feel that I have not slept properly. I had a very bad sleep. And if patient was on barbiturates for a longer period, and if the barbiturates was stopped, there might be rebound increase in REM sleep on discontinuation, which is also not good for a sound sleep. Have you understood my point? If you have not understood anything, just remember we need a balance of REM and NREM for a normal sleep, particularly to avoid hangover. This REM phase should not be disturbed along with this stage 3 and stage 4 NREM. Now, benzodiazepines, its effect as far as sleep is concerned is similar to that of barbiturate with some differences. The similarity is that it increases the onset of sleep, reduces the intermittent awakening, and increases the total sleep duration like barbiturate. And like barbiturate, it also decreases the stage 3 and stage 4 NREM. But the good thing is that unlike barbiturate, the overall effect on the REM cycle is less prominent. Though it shortens the REM phase, but there is more REM cycle. So overall, the overall effect on REM cycle is less marked. And because of this reason, with the use of benzodiazepine, the chances of hangover happening is very less. Are you getting my point? So benzodiazepines and sleep. Why it is important that the REM sleep phase should not be disturbed or should be less affected for a drug to be a good hypnotic. Why? Because if REM phase is affected, patient will have hangover. So artificial interruption of REM sleep causes irritation and anxiety even if total amount of sleep is not reduced. Patient will take 8 hours, 9 hours of sleep, but if the REM phase is distorted, the patient will not have a sound slip. Now let us continue with the discussion of barbiturates. We have seen its effect on CNS. Now let us see its effect on respiratory system. As you go on increasing the dose, it will lead to respiratory depression. On CVS, higher increase in dose will lead to depression of vasomotor center. There will be decreased myocardial contractility. There will be decreased blood pressure. So large dose can lead to fall in blood pressure. In the GI smooth muscle, the GI motility is reduced. In the kidney, the urine flow might be decreased. One thing that I had not told you about its pharmacokinetic property is that barbiturates induces the CYP450 microsomal enzymes in the liver. So many drugs which are dependent on CYP450 metabolism, for example phenytoins or anticoagulant, their metabolism might be enhanced by the usage of barbiturates, because barbiturates are the enzyme inducers. Are you understanding my point? So what will happen if overdose of barbiturate is given? What can happen? Please start from the effects of high dosage of barbiturate on CNS and then continue to its effect on CVS, respiratory system, kidney, GI. What will happen in the CNS? In the CNS, it is producing dose dependent depression. In the respiratory system, high dosage will lead to respiratory depression. In the cardiovascular system, there will be decreased blood pressure. In the kidney, it might lead to renal shutdown. And the GIT, smooth muscle inhibition. So how you will manage acute barbiturate poisoning? How you will manage acute barbiturate poisoning? One manner through which you can manage any poisoning is through the antidote. But the unfortunate thing is that for barbiturate we don't have any antidote. In contrast to benzodiazepines, where antidote is available for acute barbiturate poisoning, or for barbiturate poisoning we don't have any antidote. So we have to rely on the symptomatic management of acute barbiturate poisoning. One pharmacokinetic property that we can utilize: if we alkalize the urine, it will increase the excretion of barbiturate. So if we use sodium bicarbonate to alkalize the urine, we can increase the excretion of barbiturate and their metabolite through the urine. So that is the one strategy that we adopt for the treatment of acute barbiturate poisoning. About interaction, I have already told you that they are the hepatic microsomal enzyme inducer. They can induce the metabolism of various drugs which are being metabolized by CYP450. As far as adverse effect is concerned, because they have got CNS depressant effect, if a patient is taking alcohol, the effect of alcohol can be enhanced if taken along with barbiturate. Because barbiturates distorts the sleep cycle, it can lead to hangover. The other bad thing about barbiturate is that it induces the CYP450 enzyme. Apart from that, it increases the porphyrin synthesis. So they are contraindicated in patients with acute intermittent porphyria. And if higher doses of barbiturates are used, it can lead to severe depression of respiration and cardiovascular system, leading to ultimately coma and death. Another bad thing about barbiturate is that the chances of tolerance and dependence is very high with barbiturates. Due to tolerance, there will be decreased responsiveness to a drug following repeated exposure because of downregulation of receptors, and it can produce both psychological and physiological dependence. So because it produces both psychological and physiological dependence, if a patient was on barbiturate for a very longer period and if you suddenly stops barbiturate, the patient might suffer from withdrawal symptoms, and these withdrawal symptoms might manifest as tremors, anxiety, weakness, nausea and vomiting. So anybody can summarize the disadvantages of barbiturates? One disadvantage is that it has got a narrow therapeutic index. Even a slighter increase in dose might lead to respiratory depression, cardiovascular depression, and even death. The other point is that apart from producing hangover, it is producing tolerance and dependence, and abrupt withdrawal can be lead to withdrawal symptoms, and the chances of drug-drug interaction happening with barbiturates are high because barbiturates are CYP450 enzyme inducers. So because of all these disadvantages, nowadays barbiturates are not preferred for various indications, particularly as a sedative and hypnotic. And apart from that, if overdose happens with barbiturate, we don't have any antidote available. There is no specific antidote in case of overdose. Though we have an antidote for benzodiazepine poisoning, but we don't have any antidote for barbiturate poisoning. Just I will take another few minutes to discuss the pharmacological actions of benzodiazepine, and then I will conclude this class. If we see this particular dose response curve, I had told you that drug A, the curve belonging to drug A is of barbiturate. With drug A, what we are noticing that even a smaller increase in dose is leading to, from hypnosia, patient is going to anesthesia and then respiratory depression and cardiovascular depression and coma, and even patient can die. But for the similar thing to happen with benzodiazepines, you will need a very higher increase in dose. So we can say that benzodiazepines have got a relatively greater margin of safety compared to barbiturates. And benzodiazepines produces dose dependent but limited depression of CNS, and basically it produces four actions. It reduces the anxiety and aggression, it reduces the muscle tone, leads to sedation and induction of sleep, and it produces anticonvulsant effect. Similar to barbiturate, benzodiazepine decreases the time taken to get to sleep and increases the total duration of sleep. But I had told you earlier that it is not distorting the normal sleep cycle. It is not distorting the REM phase. So the hangover effect is not observed with the benzodiazepines. So to sum up, what we can say, why barbiturates are not preferred? I want an answer from you. Why barbiturates are not preferred? It has got a low margin of safety. Even a smaller increase in dose can produce respiratory depression or cardiovascular depression. The second thing is that if used during if used for hypnosis, it produces hangover. The other thing is that it is producing dependence. Tolerance is also seen. Abrupt withdrawal can lead to withdrawal symptoms. The other thing is that it is a CYP4 enzyme, 450 enzyme inducer, and overall, if overdose happens, you don't have any specific antidote available for the treatment of overdose of barbiturates. So because of these reasons, barbiturates are not preferred. And in contrast to barbiturate, benzodiazepines, they do not produce any hangover during sleep or after sleep. Their safety margin is better compared to barbiturate. They have got low abuse liability, and above all, we have got a specific antagonist for the treatment of overdose of benzodiazepine, that is flumazenil. So we will continue our discussion in the next class, wherein we will discuss about benzodiazepines and their mechanism of action, and also we will discuss the mechanism of action of barbiturates in the next class. Thank you.